My wife divorced me and kicked out after won $9 million. But she didn't know about the prenup her parents forced me to sign before marriage. I come from a humble family, you know? My folks live in a quiet suburb, and I grew up in a small, 3-bedroom house that always smelled of fresh laundry and home cooking. After high school, I bounced around a bit, working different odd jobs. I did some bartending, helped out at my uncle's hardware store, and eventually managed a local sporting goods place. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest work. My wife, though, she was from a totally different world than I was used to. Her parents owned a bunch of properties, drove really expensive cars, and threw huge, lavish parties a few times every year. Let's call my father-in-law Orion and my mother-in-law Anya. Anya was a tall, impressive guy who just had a quiet power about him, no matter where he was. He'd make these casual remarks that felt more like hidden threats or ways to subtly control things. Anya was also good at just subtly showing he didn't approve. One raised eyebrow from him could make anyone feel tiny. They were never openly mean to my face, but I could always feel their disapproval behind all the polite talk. After my wife and I got engaged, I quickly realized how much her parents worried that outsiders would try to get their family's money. They treated me like I was just some random person trying to sneak in, even though my wife and I had been dating for years. Before we could even set a wedding date, Orion insisted I sign a prenuptial agreement. I didn't have the cash to fight it legally. And, honestly, I was just so head over heels in love. I kept telling myself it was just a symbolic thing to keep her parents happy. Isn't love the only real promise I needed? I'd think. The day I signed that paper is super clear in my head. It was a warm afternoon at her parents' massive house. Anya laid the document down and slid a pen towards me. He offered me coffee, acting like it was just a regular business meeting. My wife stood to the side and barely said a word. That stung, but I brushed it off, thinking it wouldn't matter in the long run. The contract basically said that any gifts, inheritances, or trust funds from her family would stay her property, but any big stuff we got together, like a house or lottery winnings, would be considered marital property. That seemed a bit odd to me, but all I truly wanted was to marry her. 6 months later, we got hitched in a beautiful wedding by a lake. My parents were a bit overwhelmed by all the luxury, but they were still really supportive. My dad's face was tense when he greeted my in-laws. He'd always taught me to trust my gut feelings, but I figured love would just make any doubts disappear. The first few years went by without any major issues. We lived in a condo that her parents helped us get. I made monthly mortgage payments, even though the down payment came from her father's gift. Looking back, it wasn't really a gift at all, it was more like a way to control us. But back then, I just thought that's how rich families did things. Our marriage had its usual money disagreements and sometimes we'd argue about our parents meddling in our decisions. They'd show up out of the blue, bring new furniture or decorations, and sometimes even rearrange our whole living space without asking. My wife would just shrug off my frustration, saying it was just her parents being supportive. Then came the day that everything went completely sideways. My wife called me, super excited, to tell me she had won a $9 million lottery prize with a random ticket she bought at a petrol station. At first, I was over the moon, dreaming about quitting our jobs and traveling the world. But my excitement slowly fizzled out. She insisted we keep it a secret, even from my own parents. She started acting strangely cautious, talking about claiming the money correctly and meeting with lawyers I'd never heard of before. When I asked to join these meetings, she told me I'd be out of place, and that really hurt. I had no idea the real shocker was coming next. One afternoon, I got home from work, tired out, and found her rummaging through drawers with her aunt. She just casually announced that she was filing for divorce and told me to pack my bags and leave the apartment, which she claimed was under her name. I was floored. Yeah. I paid monthly mortgage payments. But she clearly thought her father's original down payment and her new wealth made me useless. My heart just broke. I called my dad, my voice cracking, and told him I'd just been kicked out of my own home. It was the ultimate betrayal. The biggest shock came right after that. I found out that my father-in-law had sent his private lawyer to protect her. They wanted me out so they could keep all the lottery money away from me. Except, they'd completely forgotten about the rules in the prenuptial agreement they'd forced on me. Instead of fully protecting their daughter, it actually stated that any big windfall earned during the marriage counted as a shared asset. It hit me then. If they rushed to divorce me right after winning the jackpot, they might not be able to keep anything for themselves. I decided to play it smart. My dad told me to stay calm, find a lawyer outside their fancy social circle, and get ready for a tough fight. I was dead set on not backing down. They had basically thrown down the gauntlet, treating me like some annoying fly they could just swat away. If they thought I'd just walk away quietly, they were seriously mistaken. I spent a few nights at my folks' house, trying to wrap my head around everything. My mom was furious, ranting about how rude my in-laws had been from the start. My dad, even though he was mad too, stayed practical. He called an old buddy of his, a family law attorney, and set up an appointment for me first thing in the morning. Sitting in that lawyer's office, I felt a mix of anger and relief. I told him all about how my in-laws insisted on the prenup, how my wife won $9 million, and how she then blindsided me with a divorce. He chuckled as he looked over the prenuptial agreement. They shot themselves in the foot, he told me. They specifically put language in there that includes lottery winnings as marital assets. Unless a judge pulls some crazy legal trick, you're entitled to a big chunk of that money. This was a lifeline for me. I had been so scared the prenup would shut me out. But it turned out their fear of me claiming inherited wealth was bigger than their concern about a lottery win. My lawyer warned me it wouldn't be easy. My in-laws were loaded, well-connected, and would probably bring in a whole team of lawyers. But he believed we had a good case, especially since I had contributed financially to our marriage and had been unceremoniously kicked out of our shared home. I asked about how divorce cases usually go in our state. He said a contested divorce could drag on for months or even longer. But if my wife's side realized they were on shaky ground, they might push for an early settlement. The lawyer also warned that they would probably try to scare me or use sneaky tricks to get me to give up my rights cheaply. Within a few days, my father-in-law left me a really scary message. He told me to back off because I deserved nothing from his daughter. He even threatened that if I tried to get any of the lottery winnings, he'd make sure I got squat. My lawyer just told me to write everything down. Then my mother-in-law cornered me outside my parents' house. She suggested a pathetic, quiet exit. She made it sound like a great deal, but it wouldn't even cover half of my mortgage payments. I told her no, point blank. We'd see each other in court. She scoffed, clearly confused by my refusal. I guess nobody ever told her no before. Since we couldn't agree on anything, my lawyer filed papers to stop them from hiding or moving the lottery money. That really made my in-laws mad. They started spreading rumors, saying I was a gold digger who took advantage of their young daughter. It stung, but I stood my ground. My boss, who owned the sporting goods store, had my back and shut down my father-in-law's attempts to mess with my job. Friends started picking sides, some called me petty, while others cheered me on for fighting back. The stress was awful, but I refused to give up. After weeks of trying to work things out, we finally got a court date. My wife was nowhere to be seen in person. She was practically hiding under her parents' wing, avoiding any direct talk with me. She let her lawyers do all the talking, claiming I was a leech who hadn't contributed anything to the marriage. My lawyer disagreed, showing financial records, proof of shared bills, and that specific part of the prenup about windfalls. We also talked about how I was abruptly kicked out of the condo. The judge told both sides to get ready for a more formal hearing about dividing up our assets. In one last try at scaring me, my father-in-law threatened my boss again. My boss quickly told him to buzz off. That just made my father-in-law even angrier. My lawyer told us to be careful, but he was sure a judge would see right through their intimidation tactics. Nothing could have fully prepared me for the big showdown in court, but I knew the law was on my side. And the funny thing was, it was because of the very prenup they made me sign. Weeks flew by, and the tension for the upcoming hearing was through the roof. My wife still wouldn't talk to me directly, but her lawyers kept hitting me with legal documents. They insisted the lottery win was hers alone because she bought the ticket, even though the prenup clearly said any big windfall during marriage was joint property. Meanwhile, my father-in-law kept trying to trash my name among friends and business contacts. He kept pushing the story that I was just a gold digger who married into their family for money. During all this, I felt a mix of anger and determination. If they thought they could just bully me out of my rights, they had another thing coming. I had records proving how I contributed to our life together, electricity bills, grocery receipts, and half of the mortgage payments. My attorney and I went over every single part of the prenup. He pointed out a key clause that said, any financial windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winnings, are considered marital assets unless specifically stated otherwise. It was like my in-laws had accidentally left a back door wide open. A week before the hearing, we had a pre-trial meeting. My wife showed up with her parents and a whole squad of lawyers, 4 attorneys and a financial advisor. They looked at me with their usual snooty attitude, but their vibe changed when my lawyer calmly showed them the prenuptial agreement, pointing out the exact part about lottery money. The judge listened closely, didn't seem impressed by their attempts to throw out the case, and ordered that all major assets be frozen until the main hearing. That same day, my mother-in-law trapped me outside the courthouse, demanding we talk like adults. She tried to offer me a one-time payment that was much lower than before, calling it generous for someone of my background. I refused again, telling her we'd let the judge decide. She snapped that I was destroying the family, As if I was the one who surprised her daughter with a divorce. The nerve of her made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. My lawyer had told me not to get into heated arguments that they could use against me later. Behind the scenes, I was scared my in-laws might try to hide the lottery money in secret accounts. My lawyer, expecting this, filed court orders to stop any big transfers. We also had a forensic accountant on standby in case we suspected them of stashing cash. My father-in-law's temper flared up again. He left me a voicemail, calling me filthy and accusing me of taking the love from his daughter's life. That was rich, considering they were the ones who kicked me out right after she won the lottery. As the hearing got closer, I meticulously planned with my lawyer. We practiced what I would say to make sure I seemed calm and stuck to the facts in court. I had copies of the prenup, receipts for the mortgage payments I made, and even texts from my wife confirming our shared bills. The lawyer told me to keep my answers short and to the point. He said, "The evidence will speak for itself. If they try any emotional theatrics, we'll hit them back with precise documents." On the morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse, my heart pounding like a drum. My parents came along for moral support, but they stayed outside the courtroom. When everything started, I saw my wife sitting next to her father, both with hard, stone faces. Her mother hung back in the rear, arms crossed. My father-in-law's lawyers, decked out in fancy suits, looked confident, probably hoping their money and legal power would beat the truth. The judge, a serious woman in her 50s, didn't waste any time. She asked each side to present their arguments. My wife's main attorney tried to paint me as a small contributor who had basically just shared a living space. They claimed the lottery ticket was bought personally with her money. But my lawyer calmly reminded them that the prenup specifically listed such windfalls as marital property. We also had bank records showing she had used our joint account card that day. When we showed this info, I could see the tension in my father-in-law's group. The judge asked if they had any more paperwork proving it was her personal money. They fumbled, trying to say the card was used by accident or that it was her father's deposit into the account. But the bank statements clearly had both our names, not just hers. The judge made a note, her eyes fixed on them with expectation. Finally, my wife spoke. She said she never meant to upset me and that her parents pushed for a divorce after she won the prize to protect family assets. She stumbled over her words, admitting she was under pressure but also trying to excuse it by saying if anyone found out about the money, they would come after us. My lawyer asked if she talked to me before making these decisions. She admitted no. The judge's disapproval was clear as day. By lunchtime, it was clear their prenup was a double-edged sword. The very paper they thought would protect their cash now looked like it would hand a big chunk of the lottery winnings to me. The court ordered another meeting for the final decision. The judge said she leaned towards seeing the lottery money as a major shared asset that should be split fairly. Outside, my father-in-law walked past me, muttering, "This ain't over." But his tough guy act was definitely crumbling. They got more and more desperate in the weeks leading up to the final ruling. My father-in-law's lawyers threw everything they had at us. They filed papers trying to change the prenup, saying it wasn't meant to cover lottery wins. But the judge shut them down, pointing out what the document actually said. My mother-in-law tried to corner me again, telling me I'd be sorry if I hurt their family. I told her flat out that they started this whole mess by kicking me out and dropping the divorce bomb. My wife tried to get in touch, leaving a teary voicemail saying she wanted things to end nicely. She even suggested a secret deal and that maybe we could fix things between us. I might have thought about it if they'd been fair from the start. But after all the bullying, lies, and getting booted out, I just couldn't trust them anymore. My lawyer told me not to get involved in any of those secret talks. We had a solid case and no reason to settle for peanuts. Finally, the day of the last hearing came. The courtroom was packed with lawyers from both sides. My mom, dad, and a couple of friends came to support me, sitting quietly in the back. The judge sat down, looked over the updated papers, and gave her final thoughts. My father-in-law's main lawyer took one last jab, trying to make me look like a sneaky opportunist who found a loophole in the prenup after soaking up their family's kindness. My lawyer just laid out the facts. First, they forced me to sign that prenup. Second, it clearly said lottery winnings or other windfalls were shared property. And third, while my father-in-law paid some of the condo, I paid monthly, so it wasn't just his asset. Plus, the quick divorce filing right after she won the prize was clear proof they wanted to cut me out of the money. The judge listened carefully and then announced her decision. She said the lottery winnings absolutely counted as marital property, just like the prenup stated. She chewed out my in-laws for trying to twist the agreement they themselves wrote. She also ruled that my wife kicking me out of the condo so suddenly was unfair, and I deserved to be paid back for my share of the mortgage and contributions to our marriage. Basically, the judge ordered that I would get a good chunk of the lottery money, plus compensation for my share of the condo. We wrapped things up, with a date set a few weeks later just to finalize the paperwork. My father-in-law looked absolutely furious, and my mother-in-law was spitting mad, whispering intensely to him. My wife stood there with tears in her eyes, either truly sorry or just mad about losing so much cash. I felt like I won, but I also felt sad. We used to be in love, but their greed, her parents' meddling, and their efforts to screw me over ruined it all. Afterward, their lawyers tried to offer a slightly different settlement, probably hoping I'd take less to avoid more trouble. My lawyer pushed for us to just stick with the judge's decision. We had no reason to take less. The only thing I gave up was my share in the condo. I never wanted to set foot in that place ever again. They wrote me a check for a seriously good amount. Was it half the jackpot? Nah, not quite, but it was enough for me to start my life over comfortably. Through it all, I figured out that my in-laws, with their big egos, just thought their money would shield them from any trouble. They never expected me to actually fight back and win. Funny thing is, the prenup they forced on me ended up being the very thing that got me my share of the winnings. If that ain't poetic justice, I don't know what island. My wife, from what I hear, is still under her parents' thumb. She lost some serious street cred in her social circle because of all the drama. Some mutual friends told me she's feeling guilty, but I doubt she'd ever openly admit her family's part in all this mess. To thank my folks for their support, I used some of the settlement money to help them upgrade their house. Another good chunk got invested. And while the whole thing left me with some scars, totally changing how I see trust, marriage, and money, I feel good knowing I didn't back down. I refused to be pushed around and take just crumbs. Even though it hurt like hell, the outcome felt like a win against being walked all over. Now that I'm free from my in-laws' sneaky clutches, I'm moving forward. I've gone back to a simpler life, which is kind of weirdly like my days before I got married. But I'm tougher, smarter, and definitely not the naive guy they thought they could just roll right over. If they remember one thing about me, it should be that they accidentally gave me the legal weapon I needed to not go broke. They started the fight, I finished it, and that's the end of this chapter. Looking back on everything, I've learned a few big lessons that I want to share with you. First off, always trust your gut. My dad always told me that, but I let love blind me for a while. If something feels off, even if you're head over heels, pay attention to it. Secondly, never let anyone, no matter how rich or powerful, bully you into taking less than you deserve. Standing up for myself, even when it was terrifying, was the best decision I ever made. It shows that even when people try to use their money and influence to crush you, if you have the law and the facts on your side, you can win. And ironically, sometimes the very things people use to control you can end up being your biggest advantage, like that prenup. This whole mess really opened my eyes to how greed and family meddling can just tear relationships apart. We had love, but all that other stuff poisoned it. Now, I'm stronger, smarter, and I know my worth. So, what do you think about my story? Have you ever had to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.